Thank you for watching the World Community Magazine's Hour of Power Live on Facebook with your hosts Edward McQueen and April Garner.
And good evening to everyone. I'm your host, Ed McQueen, for today, and we want to welcome you to our program. It's going to be a special month because this is the month of June. My co-host, April, had some other priorities and could not be our co-host for this evening. Going to miss her very much. But anyway, welcome to the program, and we want to get right into some of our upcoming events, and one especially coming up next weekend. I won't elaborate on it, but what I will do, I would ask one of our special guests, of course, which was promoted in our what we sent out, Reverend Cheryl Adamson. And she has with her Mr. Franklin J. Goss, who is director of the Call Me Mr. program. So, like I said, we'll get right into it, and then as Cheryl is being seated now, okay. Good afternoon to you.
Hey there, how are you?
Adamson. I want to add your other guest that you brought along with you, but as we talk, then you can just give me the appropriate time for which to add them, okay? But okay. Reverend Adamson is here to talk today about the upcoming huge event. This is, I don't know if there's ever been such a collaboration between the entities in our communities or not, but this is a huge event, and it's called our Juneteenth celebration. And a lot of us don't know the history of the Juneteenth. We think we know. I thought I knew just about everything about it, but there's always new revelations that are coming into play as you do research and you and these important things that come up. So, Reverend Adamson, if you could kindly. You don't have to introduce yourself because I'm sure that most people know you, but you might want to do it anyway. You as you being the CEO of Whittemore Race Path Historical Society.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's always fun when Ed calls you up and says, "Come on the show." We're always grateful to be able to do that because it really does matter that we stay in touch with the community. I am the pastor of Palmetto Missionary Baptist Church, among other things, but that's primary. But 2.5 years ago, the Whittemore Race Path Historical Society was established with an aim to lift up the achievements of the African American community in Horry County. Not only the individuals and their families and their achievements, but also to lift up the places, to lift up the homes, to lift up the churches, to lift up the schools, and all of the advancements that we have made over the time that we have been in this country, in this state, in this county. And we are doing that in numerous ways. Some of the things that we have done is present educational things in the community, such as making presentations at the Horry County Museum, because what we have found over the years is that our history and our story, thereby our story, has been discounted, not only by the majority community, but also by our own people. We often don't find that the things that we have done, the things that we have created, the things that we have built have not been given their rightful place in the pantheon of history. So therefore, we feel the need to lift up our places, our homes, our churches, our schools, and our achievements so that our children can know that they have a firm foundation, they have a reason for being, and that their contributions will not be lost to the future, that they will be able to, in fact, stand the test of time with regard to themselves. You know, when I preach a funeral, I generally focus on what the deceased person has left behind. And, you know, the essence of who and what we are the memories that people have of us, the stories that people tell about us. That is our essence. So we don't have a story to tell about ourselves and our communities, then we are lost. We are lost. I just came out of a Bible study tonight, and our Bible study is about the good and beautiful you. And tonight we were talking about what our soul needs or what our soul longs for. And among the things that our soul longs for, among the most important things, is that our own story would have meaning. And that means that our lives have meaning and that we have purpose, that we were just not put here on the earth for something frivolous or not of significance. So the Whittemore Race Path Historical Society exists to magnify and hold up the significance of the African American community. And by God's grace, we're learning how to do that. We're learning how to tell our own story. We got the term "We Are Whittemore" from Professor Veronica Davis Gerald, and we are running with that because we are Whittemore, but we are lots of things. And so we are the story. We are the story of our freedom. And we want to be able to tell that story and its significance. We're going to have another person on if he can get on. Okay, the host. Yeah, so he's in the waiting room, our brother Ed.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, Brother Franklin Goss.
Yes, sir, and everything.
Well, good evening.
Yes, sir. Welcome to the program.
Yes.
It's great to be
Dr. Goss, I was just telling them why Whittemore Race Path Historical Society exists. And we exist because our lives have purpose and our lives have meaning, and we have to tell the story of our own present day story, but we need to tell the story of our ancestors and our families, our places, our churches, our schools. So we are endeavoring to help to tell the story about our freedom, our origin story. Whenever we meet young couples or a new couple, we always, my husband and I, relish hearing their origin story. We relish hearing how they met. And so invariably the husband will have one story and the wife will have another. And we enjoy hearing their origin story. I have even taken to asking people about their conception story. And you know, there are not very many people who know the circumstances under which they were conceived. And they're shocked about it, question, you know, because it really gets back to where did you come from? So we have this story. We have a story about our freedom, and it's going to be told in conjunction with the Smith-Jones Commission, which is the overseeing body of the Smith-Jones Community Center, and the City of Conway Department of Parks and Rec. This is our first year getting together to tell the story of Juneteenth and to celebrate that en masse as a community. So if we want to begin with Dr. Goss telling you about himself and then telling you the story of Juneteenth, then I can come back and talk about the activities that will occur on Saturday, June the 15th at Smith Jones Community Center, beginning at 10 a.m. and running on beyond 2 p.m.
Well, all right, Mr. Goss.
Yes, and to echo a point mentioned by Reverend Adamson is the point that it is critically important that we tell our story. I'd like to begin by introducing who I am. I'm Franklin Gause. I'm the principal consultant for PACE Education Services. I am also the director for the Call Me Mr. program at Coastal Carolina University, and I am a faculty member in the teacher ed department also at Coastal Carolina University. Originally from Horry County, I grew up right in Lower South Carolina. Matriculated through K-12 and would later leave to go off to college and gain some experiences, gain some information. And now I'm back to work alongside of Reverend Adamson and so many others in the community to help document the history and tell the stories of our people, our history, our culture. So often it's where you would find people trying to tell our story for us, and they never take the time to get to know who we are. They just tell the story in which they would like to share, where it doesn't necessarily benefit us. So we are working tirelessly, like so many others, to tell our stories, to ensure that the generations that follow understand where we've been, where we are, and where we can go. So I'd like to share just some information about Juneteenth, just the general history.
Right.
Juneteenth received its name from the date June 19th. It's a mashup of the two. And it first began in 1865. It was on that day in Galveston, Texas, that a Union military general by the name of Gordon Granger issued what was called the General Order Number 3 from the current president at the time, who was Andrew Johnson. And it stated that enslaved Black people were declared free from slavery. Andrew Johnson, he wasn't voted as president. He assumed the presidency with the assassination of Abraham Lincoln in April 1865. And so sometimes folks may get Juneteenth confused with the Emancipation Proclamation.
Mm-hmm.
So let me share what the Emancipation Proclamation was. The Emancipation Proclamation was issued by Abraham Lincoln January 1st, 1863. This was in the middle of the Civil War. And he declared in the Emancipation Proclamation that all enslaved Black people in the states that rebelled were declared free from the institution of slavery. These were the states that were considered the Confederate states, who wanted to continue the institution of slavery. And because the Union did not want to do that, the United States as a whole, they decided to form their own country, which became the Confederate States of America. Mm-hmm. And so from that point, you would have South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas. These were the states that made up the Confederacy, or the Confederate States of America. And so interestingly, about Lincoln's decision with the Emancipation Proclamation, it was not really designed from his perspective to end slavery. It was a strategy to get those that were enslaved in the southern states, those in the Confederacy, to turn on their enslavers and to support the fight with the Union to win the war. So slavery still existed in the Union states, but it would later end at the conclusion of the Civil War. But in 1865, when you would have Juneteenth emerge, what did freedom really mean in 1865? Well, when you look at the institution of slavery, Black people were not even considered people when they were enslaved. We were considered property. The term used to describe Black people during that time was chattel, similar to cattle. And so we were not even considered to be human beings. So we were not allowed to express or practice our God-given human rights, nor the civil rights that citizens in this country at that time were allowed to practice. So after the announcement of emancipation on the day of Juneteenth, you would later see the addition of 3 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. The first being the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, except as a punishment for a crime if convicted. And that's critically important for us to understand. I'm going to repeat. Slavery was abolished except as a punishment for a crime if convicted. So you would later see the emergence of the prison industrial complex, which incarcerates so many of our Black and brown people today. The 14th Amendment was also added to the Constitution, which granted citizenship to Black people, and the 15th Amendment granted the right to vote. So after Juneteenth, Black people pressed this country for land, because you cannot realize freedom without a place where you can call your own. You can never be free from bondage until you're able to live independent of those who tried to oppress you or did oppress you. So this was facilitated by General William Sherman of the Union Army. As he marched through the South with the Union Army and won battle after battle, the lands were being confiscated. And because of the lands being confiscated, because white planters, those enslavers, would flee, they would leave the land behind, Sherman actually began redistributing the land to Black people because they had nowhere to be. And many were tagging along with the Union Army because they didn't have a place of their own. And that became known as the Special Field Order number 15. Most people know it as 40 acres and a mule. And so this redistributing of the land began in the mid part of January in 1865, and it was revoked in April of 1865 by then President Johnson after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. So many Black people never received any compensation from slavery, which is why we still have this topic of reparations today.
That's right.
And why there's a need to address that, because there has been this gap, whether it's through politics, economics, this major gap that has been created since the institution of slavery ended. Now, in addition to land, there were things that Black people valued greatly and prioritized when emancipation took place. Reconnecting with family members who were separated during families. Oftentimes you would find where there would be a man who has a wife, but legally we couldn't marry because we weren't citizens. So the wife or the mother of the children may have been sold to a different plantation or vice versa. Children could have been sold to other plantations. So there was this great effort to reconnect family. Because family is the oldest institution in the Black community. So it was a very critically important to establish or reestablish families. Establishing a last name or surname. Um, Most Black people on plantations during slavery didn't have a last name. They may have assumed the last name of the plantation owner, but they didn't have a last name. They were only given a first name oftentimes. And because of that, some decided to create their own name. And so it's critically important because your name is a part of your identity. That's who people identify you as. And so your surname, having a last name, was critically important in establishing yourself in this country because everybody who was a citizen had a first and last name. Building places to worship. Black people have always been very spiritually connected. And so having churches or institutions of worship that were separate from those that they may have worshiped when they were enslaved was critically important as well. Legally marrying was critically important. There are advantages to being married that you have as citizens in this country, but it really solidifies the fact that you can have that family structure that was critically important in this society. So having formal marriages and becoming literate, which became a very, very important initiative in the Black community, because becoming literate was the tool that Black people have been able to use to gain opportunities equivalent to citizens in this country. Learning to read and write was illegal during slavery, and rightfully so, because those that enslaved Black people understood that if you understood that you can write and read, then you would know that the institution of slavery was unjust, immoral, and therefore you would rebel. And so most of those plantation owners did not allow Black people to learn how to read and write. They wanted to keep us in a place where we were illiterate and ignorant so that we wouldn't challenge the institution and accept second-class citizenship to them. And so with that, you will see the emergence of schools. But before that happened, there was an election in 1868, which was at the Constitution of 1868. And because we had gained the right to vote, Black people were the majority in the state of South Carolina. And because we were the majority when it was time for elections, we were able to elect a majority Black legislature. And through that process in 1868, one of the initiatives that was put forth with that Black legislature is that education, public education, would be free and available to everyone, regardless of race or background. So South Carolina led the charge in creating free public education. And then you would see the emergence of institutions, HBCUs, South Carolina State in 1896, and Claflin University, Voorhees. But also those schools had schools on them for grade school. But then you also saw churches having schools. So literacy became a priority in order to fulfill and realize citizenship in this country. So Juneteenth marks the formal declaration issued by the President of the United States that slavery was going to be abolished and enslaved Black people were now going to be emancipated after the end of the Civil War. So we celebrate Juneteenth because that is considered the Emancipation Day for Black people, as opposed to July 4th, 1776. That was the emancipation of this country from England, but Black people were still enslaved when the Revolutionary War ended. And although we celebrate on July 4th, many of us, we were still enslaved and we still participated in the effort to liberate this country, because every major war, every conflict, our people have supported the initiative to bring about the change that was needed in order to move forward. But yet, the opportunities have not always been equivalent or shared in a way where we could benefit from the gains or the things that were granted from those victories.
So that narrative, man, I've been educated, a little bit more. And congratulations on being the director of the Call Me Mr. program.
Thank you.
I recall we had a gentleman on our radio program some time ago who was then the director of it. I forgot his name. But before you were director of Call Me Mr. program?
Yes. The director prior to me, his name is Dr. Jerome Christia.
Okay. Yeah, and that was a pretty active program over there, and had a lot of support, and it did some wonderful things. And this was 5 years ago.
It's been great. Over the years, the program has seen a number of young Black men entering the field of education, and I would like to acknowledge the fact that this program, which started in 2000 with 4 institutions: Clemson University, Benedict College, Claflin, as well as Morris College. Those 4 institutions came together and started this initiative because at the time, there was less than 1% Black men teaching in the teaching force at the elementary level. And elementary is the most impressionable stages in a young person's life.
Absolutely.
And so it was critically important to start an initiative that will lead to a shift where there would be more Black men entering the school system and teaching at the elementary level. And so since 2000, there have been a great number of Black men, not only in South Carolina, but around the country, because there are Call Me Mr. programs now emerging at different institutions around the country, meeting that challenge of the teacher shortage, and has been doing so since the year 2000.
So this may not be deemed very important at this stage of the juncture, but what kind of increase in Black male teachers have there been?
Well, I would say the percentage is still quite low when you compare the percentage to the overall teaching force. 85%, roughly 80 to 85% of the teaching force today is white middle-class women. And so there's a number of reasons why that is today. But we have had many gains in getting more African-American males in the classroom. And not just getting them in the classroom, but staying in the classroom, not just leaving the classroom for an administrative role. Because oftentimes that's what happens when Black men in the school system. We're quickly picked to be in that assistant principal or principal to address discipline as opposed to academics. And our kids need to be engaging Black men in the classroom, learning their academics or engaging them with their social and emotional development so that they can have a different trajectory when they go and leave high school. And so we've seen a number of gains. We're getting closer to the 1% mark. And I will say, speaking from our program at Coastal, we this past spring graduated 3 young Black men who are now in classrooms, and we had a cohort of 11. And in the fall, we will have close to 20. So there is interest, there's a desire for more young men to enter the classroom. But what will facilitate a greater shift is when they can actually engage with Black male teachers or see them in the schools. When they see it, they can aspire to be it. It's very difficult to aspire to be something that you never see. You may hear about it, but unless you see it, it's difficult for you to really see yourself in that role. And so to give them the opportunity, young children, the opportunity to engage with young Black men in the classroom setting, it shifts the narrative for them about whether or not teaching or becoming a teacher, which we emphasize being servant leaders, being of service to others, and leading change by transforming the way teaching is done. We emphasize those areas so that the children will see that there's a clear distinction in what we're trying to do as opposed to what their experience may have been.
That is this.
Yeah,
Can you
I
hear
don't know
me?
the depth of concern by our leaders in the past. I don't know if that's really been critically examined in depth to the point where, you know, we can see some action taking place to kind of address that issue, because it was a critical issue. You can see the outcome of our young men today as a result. That's my opinion. As a result of having a lack of Black male teachers for the past 15 to 20 years, maybe longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I will like to make this point, which connects to the importance of the initiatives by Reverend Adams. It was 1954 with the Brown ruling that we would see the decision that led to the desegregation of schools. But what is important to note is with desegregation, even it took a while for it to take place in this state, but you would see Black schools being closed and Black students are being shipped or being directed to go to white schools. And so those Black institutions, those Black schools are now still in some communities, but they are historical sites that we have to preserve because they're in our communities. And what we are seeing nationally, not just regionally or on a state level, is the erasure of Black institutions like churches, like schools, like businesses that have been cornerstone in the Black community. They have been spaces that we've occupied and used for our benefit and our growth, our development, but also preserving our history. Those institutions are being torn down and destroyed. And it's critically important that we take up the charge and the mantle to start putting forth the effort to preserve those institutions so that we can tell the history that is connected to those institutions, like a Whittemore School, like Myrtle Beach Color School, like Booker T. Washington High School in Columbia, taking the time to document the history, the people who have used those spaces, but also had experiences associated with those spaces so that the later generations, the generations to follow, will know what has been the experiences of their ancestors, their parents, their grandparents, so on and so forth, and be able to have a greater value on their experiences, their history, and their culture, because it shapes who they are. But in this upward battle to preserve these institutions in our communities, we're losing the fight in some places, and it's literally where our footprints are being erased. And so many cases, what you will find in a number of cities around the country, Black people have inhabited areas, but you would not know that today because it doesn't have Black people in those spaces. nor are there markers or any buildings that have been preserved to show that we have inhabited those spaces. And so, with the initiative by Whittemore Race Path and Reverend Adamson and so many others who are working tirelessly to preserve our history, we have to find what it takes and utilize the resources we have to preserve our institutions, to preserve our history and culture.
I think that's well said. We want to, unless Reverend Addison has something to say about that.
You know, I always have something to say, right?
Yeah, I saw you making a motion there, and so I thought before I started talking, I'll let you go ahead and say what you want to say here.
Okay, well, you know, of course, back to Juneteenth, one of the most seminal speeches given in our history was that what to the slave is the 4th of July by Frederick Douglass, where he was asked to come and give a speech and celebrate the 4th of July, just as we do. But in his speech, he said, you know, you got all this pomp and circumstance going about your throwing off your oppression and getting your freedom. But that's not the case for me. He said that he had a sad sense of disparity between what they were celebrating and what African people in America were experiencing. Justice and liberty and prosperity and independence was not our lot. And it was just ironic that they would have a person who had run away from slavery and freed himself to come and help them to celebrate the 4th of July. So there's a major difference in what we're celebrating when we celebrate Juneteenth and what the country as a whole celebrates when they celebrate the 4th of July. We're talking about almost a whole century, more or left, of enslavement that our people had to endure before we were having the opportunity to experience even a whiff of what it meant to be free people. And a lot of our people don't appreciate, well, what is this Juneteenth? Why is it significant? It is significant because even after the Emancipation Proclamation, which was a military tactic to get more people to fight against the Confederate States, even with that, all of the persons who were holding people in bondage just left them in a state of ignorance and not knowing that they had a right to be free. So it's really critically important that we teach that to our children. And as Dr. Goss said, our fight to hold on to our places and to have an indelible footprint in a community is just so important to us. It's just amazing that he and I were talking about the same things, the pillars of our community, our families, our homes, our churches, our schools, and how we worked so hard to have the ability to read, because you could be killed for learning to read because it meant freedom. So we're working on two ends. Let me just tell you what some of the things are that are going to happen on the day of June the 15th. And then I want to tell you about some efforts in our community for us to teach our own children. So Smith Jones Community Center and the Conway Parks and Rec Department, along with the Whittemore Race Path Historical Society, invites the community to join in the Juneteenth community celebration from 10 to 2 on Saturday, June the 15th. Everybody knows where Smith Jones is. There are a couple of things that are really important that are going to be happening. First of all, on a Friday night at 8 p.m., there's going to be a free movie in the park. They have one of those big blow up screens where people can sit around in their chairs outside and enjoy the weather. And the title of the movie is Miss Juneteenth. And it's a story,
Miss Juneteenth?
Miss Juneteenth. This was a movie that came out in 2020 and was introduced at the Sundance Film Festival. And it's won many awards, but they have not made back what they put into making the movie, at least not at the box office. So I think you're able to find it on some streaming services now. But Miss Juneteenth tells the story of a woman and her daughter, and how the mother, who was very much on a trajectory of being successful, but got waylaid by an unexpected pregnancy, is now trying to encourage her daughter to not only embrace her own beauty and her own potential, but also embrace our history. So that story, Miss Juneteenth, is going to be shown on the Friday night at 8:00 p.m. Come out and bring your chairs. And then on Saturday, we're going to have, again, one of our homeboys, Reverend Dr. Hank Singleton III, who is a theologian and professor of African American Studies. I think he teaches, he used to be at Benedict. I think he now teaches courses at the University of South Carolina. He's going to be our keynote speaker at noon on Saturday. But around the 10 to 2 time, we're going to have Dr. Frank Goss to speak again, and some other speakers. Hopefully we'll have Reverend Cedric Blaine Spain and Reverend Kenny Floyd, and I may get up and say a word or two, but we're also going to have door prizes and free packets for the kids, historical packets. We're going to be having vendors, and the vendors are going to be there at no charge for them. They don't have to pay a vendor fee to sell their wares on this Juneteenth at Smith Jones Community Center. And there's going to be free hamburgers and hot dogs and drinks provided by the city of Conway. So this is our first outing in doing something that's community-wide. I understand there are some other initiatives around town at Mason Temple Church of God in Christ and at Cherry Hill Missionary Baptist Church. But this is one where everybody can come together, and we want to invite you out there. There are also going to be some health screenings as well. So we want people to come out and participate on both Friday night at 8:00 and Saturday morning beginning at 10. Somebody suggested that folk don't get up early enough to get their kids out, but we want you to get there so that you can get some of the food. And of course, the pool will be open, and they'll have inflatables and other activities for the children. But Whittemore Race Path Historical Society wanted to get involved because we want the story of Juneteenth to be taught and caught while we're partying. You know, there are a lot of times that we have to party, but we want to party with a purpose, and we want people to learn about our history on that day.
Great, fantastic. Cheryl, is there any are there any notes, anything of that, any numbers that people can call? I had the poster up for a few seconds ago, but it didn't stay up. So. Oh,
okay. Well, of course, you can contact anyone that's on the Smith Jones Commission. Ms. Deborah Butler is a primary point person there. And then your lovely bride, Ms. Joella McQueen, and Priscilla Fuller are three persons that are directly involved. And then, of course, the city of Conway. You have Ashley Smith, who is the director of Parks and Rec, and Miss Mammy. What's her last name?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
I'm blocking. She's gonna kill me. But she's a program director at Conway, and so we want to have people get in touch with them. And of course, you know, as a last resort, if you can't reach anyone, you can call me. You can always call me. But there are two billboards up, one on Highway 378. If you're coming from Walmart going toward Smith Jones Community Center, there's a billboard, and the usual billboard on Mill Pond Road for the Conway Rec Center. And then the blinking sign that as you enter the recreation center, they all have signs up describing the event and announcing the event. So we've gotten letters out to organizations and churches. We're asking for a liaison with each organization and church, and then perhaps 3 volunteers from each church and organization, so that we're able, you know, to manage the program and to help serve the food and make sure that everyone is involved and stays safe and enjoys themselves. So I'm pretty sure there'll probably be a DJ out there so people like me can dance. You know, that's always very necessary.
Yeah. You know, just a comment from some of our ardent supporters of the who was viewing this. Miss Priscilla Fuller said, although Juneteenth is important, how can the message regarding our history be something that our community is more in tune and spread to our young people?
Well, of course, this again is the beginning of our making certain that our event is just not another time to eat or a time just to play. But again, we want to party with a purpose. And so the educational material that we'll have for the young people, and seeing it in the form of a movie is another. And they're going to have packets just for the kids that's at their level. And of course, a primary thing is to teach their parents so that their parents can engage in conversations with them about what the significance of being free in America at this critical point in time, what that means. I mean, it has been the African American peoples of America that have driven it towards its highest ideal of democracy. If it were not for Black people pushing the true meaning of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, we would be nowhere near a free and equal society, as far away as we are from it now. It is Black people that have pressed the true meaning, the Holy Spirit inspired meaning of those documents. So we're absolutely critical to this country and its so-called ideals, and we want to tell that story and keep our rightful place.
Okay. Also, some of our supporters wondered who is an ardent supporter. Was Linda Carter Davis. She wants everybody to know that she's watching from Illinois.
She is a supporter of Conway now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Miss Linda Carter Davis.
So, Dr. Goss, you see, we got almost international people, right, and watching this place.
Absolutely. That's wonderful.
But we endeavor to have you back on again. I mean, to talk a bit more about the Call Me Mr. program. You know,
I would love to do that.
Yeah.
As well as some initiatives that we are working on in the community, I think would be ideal to the question that was raised about how do we teach this history. It's in spaces like this. We create platforms for our community to learn about different things related to our history and culture. so that once we know what that information is, we can take it back to those that we know. One of the greatest forms of advertising is word of mouth. And
Absolutely.
it's always been essential in our community. And so once we get that information, we share it. And as long as we're sharing it, it will spread. And nowadays, social media has played an integral part in sharing that information. So if we want to reach our youth, that's a space that we need to work tirelessly to share the history and the culture.
I mean, that you're right. That runs wild. Earlier, we didn't get the name of the lady. I think Cheryl Reverend Adamson. That we couldn't think of her name. And
yeah, Janice.
Yeah, right, right. So
Janice Dewitt Hopkins is her name.
Yeah, Brother Sharon Jones wanted to correct us and assist us. I'm glad to know that you're watching, Brother Sharon. So, and welcome to our program. I don't know if we've heard from you before. And likewise, Miss Wiggins commented on, like said, that departing with a purpose. She said she likes the theme.
Well, you know, and I have an extension of the answer to how do we reach our young people. And we are pleased. And when I say we this time, I'm talking about Palmetto Missionary Baptist Church and Palmetto Works Community Development Corporation is very pleased to announce that the Palmetto Kids Music and Arts Academy's Summer Cultural Enrichment Program is now a certified Children's Defense Fund Freedom School. The Children's Defense Fund Freedom School programs is a 6-week summer literacy and cultural enrichment program aimed at empowering K through 12 scholars to believe in their ability to make a difference in themselves, their families, community, country, and the world with hope, education, and action. Through reading and the idea that a person of faith can rally a community to understand the urgency and necessity of making a difference, we help scholars change how they think about learning. So we will be bringing to Horry County the first Freedom School, which is based on the Freedom Summers from back in the 60s in Mississippi, where the children were taken out of school and educated in churches. Marion Wright Edelman, attorney Marion Wright Edelman of Bennettsville, South Carolina, is the founder of this program. It's in its 31st year. It is a Freedom School movement that we have become a part of. And what we are able to do is train our staff through the Children's Defense Fund headquarters at the Alex Haley Farm in Clinton, Tennessee. And they just returned from that on Sunday. They left last Tuesday, came back on Sunday, and they are fired up and ready to go with their integrated reading curriculum. And what this entails is that we get the integrated reading curriculum, we get the training, we get a full library and 6 books for each of the children. And these books in our library are books that are now being banned in some schools because they are written by and written for Black and brown people, for Black and brown children. And our primary focus is on teaching them the civil rights story, the history of civil rights. And many of us adults don't even know the history of the civil rights movement. So we need the community support for us to put on this program for 6 weeks and pay the staff minimally. We're not paying them what they're worth. It costs us $30,000. And we've already paid for the curriculum, the training, the data collection, and the evaluation. We've already paid for our staff to fly or drive and be housed and fed in Knoxville, Tennessee, and Clinton, Tennessee at the Alex Haley Farm. and they're back now. Now we have to put on the program. And one of the elements of the program that any of you can participate in is we will be meeting for 24 days. And in those 24 days, we begin with a process called Harambe. That's sort of like a devotional where we get the kids hyped up. We're trying to instill joy in them, joy in their childhood, and joy in the process of reading. We want to invite 24 individuals from our community to come and do read aloud. We will give you a book about Black and brown children. We'll ask you for your bio. We'll have you to come and read it. And then after you read it, the children will ask you 3 to 4 questions about your life and about your profession. And we want everybody from janitors and HVAC people and truck drivers to physicians and teachers and preachers and dentists and lawyers and professors and publishers to come, because as Dr. Goss says, it's hard for people to become what they've never seen. And we want our children to see that they can own businesses. There's a Black woman in our community who has a car moving business. She has a truck that she can put 2 cars on. She lives right on 9th Avenue. Our children need to meet her and know that they can own their own truck and have their independent business. So go to palmettoworks.com/donate and send us some money, or cash app me at REV Reverend CMA and say that you want to help us, or come out there and help us get prepared. We'll be at the old Jamestown Baptist Church beginning June the 17th.
And that is, run that by us again, Reverend.
It's Palmetto Works Children Defense Fund Freedom School. It will run from June the 17th to July 25th. And we'll have 30 kids this time, 3 age levels, 3 reading levels. And we're excited. We have Reverend Reeves is the project director. Mr. Richard Bellamy is the site coordinator. And we have 3 young women who are the student servant leader interns. And they will be conducting the reading curriculum and bringing our children along.
Okay. Sounds like a winner to me.
It's going to be a winner. It's going to be a winner. But we need your prayers and your presence.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Dr. Goss is going to be one of our read aloud readers.
Well, that's great. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mr. McQueen, you need to be a read aloud reader.
Really?
Yeah. You got to tell them about civil engineering.
Yeah. Well, I'll be glad to do that. I'll tell them about airports.
Oh, very good.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll talk. And so, hey, this has been something today. I mean, it's been some information with Dr. Goss. Man, I'm anxious to have you back on again to talk about that. Call me Mr. Program.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we'll always have our Reverend Adamson on to keep giving us updates, especially about the Whittemore Race Path Historical Society and where it's headed. Where everybody knows where it's headed. It's headed for a positive outcome. That's
Absolutely. And I failed to say that the Whittemore Race Path Historical Society was awarded by the Horry County Preservation Commission the other night with an award for our efforts at preservation.
Right. Yeah. Right.
For our efforts at preservation. So we just have to persist. We have to do like the old folks say. We believe we'll run on and see what the end gonna be.
See what the end's gonna be.
Yes, sir.
And I really apologize for maybe, but it's not too late for it. I apologize for not having some graphics on that, on the historical awards, because we did take some photos, and that was significant for the rest of the community to know that about the Whittemore Race Path Historical Society.
But anytime you want Sister Valerie and or myself or anyone else to come on and talk about our first Whittemore Race Path Historical Society Hall of Fame banquet, that would be good to highlight those 6 people that we
absolutely
awarded.
Absolutely. Yeah, we got some things in store now. We got some things in store. That's one of the things that we're gonna have some graphics on and some video, hopefully some video on.
Okay,
and let people know, because I'm anxious to let the public know how big a audience that we had there.
Oh wow! I mean, that was
awesome.
our first time out, and it was fantastic.
It was awesome. But we're going to. Time is closing now, and Dr. Franklin, thank you so much for accompanying Reverend Adamson. And Reverend Adamson, of course, we thank you so much for giving us those highlights on the different topics that you came about with, especially the 2 with Juneteenth, and of course, Whittemore Race Path Historical Society. And again, I'll say this again, Dr. Goss, we're endeavoring to have you again.
Y'all gonna pay me a finder's fee after a while for finding this gem right here. This is just one of them, but he is a really. I am absolutely thrilled that he's one of the people that have heard the clarion call to bring that stuff back home. We need you. And we're so grateful. I mean, I know it's a sacrifice, not living in the big city and having all the accolades and all that, but charity begins at home and spreads abroad. And I'm glad you recognize that. We need you here. And we're so grateful to have you, Dr. Goss.
I'll say this and then we'll close. I'm glad you recognize that as a sacrifice for Dr. Carrying all some things in the big city, all these amenities that appear to be kind of absent. But
I think he wanted to say something, Mr. McQueen.
Well, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I know that some may consider it as a sacrifice, but I view it as a responsibility. Yes. It's a necessity to, once you have acquired information or resources that can benefit home, come back, because what we have to note is that every person that comes out of a community, they're a resource to that community. And if they leave and never return, that community will no longer have that resource that they would be representative of. And so it's critically important to go back and build or continue the building process of sharing information, continuing the fight, but also taking on to the next generation the things that need to move forward in order to sustain the community and continue the growth and development of the community. I'd be happy to come back. There's a number of resources I'd be more than happy to share that deals with the history and culture of our people, so that viewers can have access to those, because there's a lot that's been curated already that you can access offline at no cost. There are videos, there are games, there's all types of things that's been created. I've helped to create some myself. So I'd be more than happy to share those with the community, because at the end of the day, we cannot be dependent on the public school system to teach our children when we understand that it is a majority of a group that is not a part of our community. So we can't expect someone else to teach our children about themselves.
That's right.
Because they don't know who we are. And so
that's right.
We have to utilize platforms like what Reverend Adamson has with the Freedom Schools to teach that history and culture. We have to use the churches. We have to use community spaces, whatever spaces. We can use the graveyards, because there's plenty of history there. But any place where we can talk about the people that came before us, our ancestors, and share what they have done and how they have paved a way for us today, because we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, it will benefit those generations that follow.
All right. Well said. Well, thank you so much again. And I just want to say thank to our audience. Thank you so much for viewing today, and the comments that came in. Wonderful comments. We didn't show some of them, but we just want to show our appreciation to our commenters. And Godspeed. We'll see you next week. God willing, we'll see you next week, same time, and talk about some more great things, not just locally, but nationally and internationally. As we have, we showed one of our commenters from all the way from Illinois, and we're just delighted. Okay, so our viewers, thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Godspeed.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night. Good night. Good night.
And
God bless you all.
That's what I like to hear. Good night. Good night. Good night.
And God bless you all.
Right.
And I love you.
God bless you all. Okay. All right.
Thank you for watching the World Community Magazine's Hour of Power Live on Facebook with your host Edward McQueen and April Garner.